The transport shuttle carrying Ambassador Giwan and her team approached the massive structure floating in space. It was bigger than anything humans had ever built. The Galactic Council headquarters looked like a small moon made of crystal and metal, glowing with lights from 1,000 different worlds. Captain Minho sat beside Juwan, his military uniform crisp and perfect. Dr. Hannah reviewed her notes one last time, her hands shaking slightly with nervousness. This was humanity's first real meeting with the galaxy. After decades of looking at the stars and wondering if anyone was out there, they finally had their answer. The answer was yes, and there were hundreds of them. Species that had traveled the stars for thousands of years. While humans were still figuring out how to leave their own planet, the shuttle docked with a soft thud. The doors opened and Juwan stepped out first, her head held high. She had been a military strategist before becoming a diplomat, and she knew how to walk into a room like she belonged there. Minho followed, his eyes scanning everything with the careful attention of a soldier. Hannah came last, clutching her tablet with all their presentation materials. A guide met them at the entrance. It was a floating creature that looked like a jellyfish made of light. It spoke through a device that translated its words into human language. "Welcome to Centrum Prime. The Council will see you now. Please follow." They walked through corridors that seemed to stretch forever. Gigwan saw other aliens moving about, conducting their business. Some were tall and thin, others short and wide. Some walked, others floated, and a few moved in ways that seemed to defy physics entirely. None of them paid much attention to the humans. They were just another new species asking for something. The main chamber was enormous. Rows and rows of seats rose up in a circle, each one occupied by a different alien species. At the center was a platform where Giwan and her team would stand. Above them, a massive crystalline being floated. This was Council Prime Valthara, the leader of the entire Galactic Council. It had been alive for thousands of years and had seen countless species come and go. Giwan stepped onto the platform. Her voice was steady as she began to speak. "Honored members of the Galactic Council, I am Ambassador Giwan of Earth. I come before you to request membership in this great assembly. Humanity has achieved faster-than-light travel, and we wish to join the galactic community as equals." She activated the holographic display. Images of Earth appeared in the air around them. Beautiful blue oceans, green forests, tall mountains. Then images of human achievements. Cities reaching toward the sky, fusion reactors providing clean energy, quantum computers solving impossible problems. Medical advances that had cured diseases and extended human life. And finally, their new FTL drive, the technology that had brought them to the stars. The council watched in silence. Some seemed interested, others bored. Giwan had expected this. She had prepared for indifference. What she had not prepared for was what came next. "We offer our skills and knowledge to the council," Giwan continued. "Humanity has experience in survival, in adaptation, and in defense. We can contribute to the council's military forces and help maintain peace in the galaxy." For a moment, there was complete silence. Then, somewhere in the upper rows, a sound began. It was a strange chirping noise that the translator identified as laughter. Then another species joined in, a deep booming sound. Then another, and another. Within seconds, the entire chamber erupted. 800 different species, making 800 different sounds, all laughing. Some aliens flashed bright colors. Others released clouds of gas that the translator said meant amusement. The chamber's translation system struggled to keep up, creating a cacophony of overlapping words. Hilarious, impossible, adorable, ridiculous. Juwan stood perfectly still. Her face showed nothing, but inside, she felt the weight of their mockery. Beside her, Captain Minho's jaw clenched tight. Dr. Hannah looked down at her feet, her face burning with embarrassment. Council Prime Valthara raised one of its crystalline appendages. Slowly, the laughter died down. When it spoke, its voice filled the chamber with a sound like wind chimes. "Forgive us, Ambassador Juwan. We mean no disrespect, but you must understand. We have scanned your world. We have reviewed your data. Earth is classified as a Category 7 death world." The words hung in the air. Jiwan had never heard the term before, Velthara continued, his voice taking on a tone that might have been kindness, but sounded like pity. A Category 7 world is considered uninhabitable by Council standards. Your gravity is crushing. Your atmosphere is corrosive. Your weather is violent and unpredictable. Your world is covered in toxic plant life that produces a dangerously reactive gas. Your oceans are filled with salt that would kill most species. And your sun bombards you with radiation that would sterilize most worlds. Another species spoke up, a massive creature covered in scales. General Thox of the Draven Empire. His voice was deep and filled with contempt. We Draven are the greatest warriors in the galaxy. We have conquered 100 worlds, but even we would struggle to survive on your planet for more than a few days. And you want to offer us military assistance? More laughter. Some species were practically convulsing with amusement. A thin, scholarly-looking alien added its thoughts. In the Council's 100,000-year history, no Category 7 species has ever achieved space travel. Most die out within a few generations. They are evolutionary curiosities, nothing more. The fact that you survived at all is remarkable. But civilization? Technology? This is unprecedented. Velthara spoke again. We acknowledge humanity's surprising achievement, but we cannot accept you as equals. You are too primitive, too unstable, too dangerous. Species from death worlds do not integrate well. They are too violent, too unpredictable. However, we do offer you an alternative. Guan's eyes narrowed slightly. What alternative? We maintain a preserve for developing species. A place where you can live under Council protection, where you can be studied and guided. We call it the Galactic Conservation Zone. You would be safe there, protected from the dangers of the galaxy that you are not equipped to handle. As Zuguan realized, they were offering to put humanity in a zoo. General Thox laughed again, a sound like grinding rocks. The soft little apes want to be warriors. Perhaps we should send them some toys to play with. Wooden swords, maybe? The chamber erupted in laughter once more. It went on for several minutes. Species that had said nothing before joined in, not wanting to miss the joke. The humans, standing on their platform in the center of it all, were the most entertaining thing to happen in the Council chambers in decades. Finally, the laughter began to fade. Velthara looked down at the human delegation with something that might have been sympathy. Your petition for Council membership is denied. We suggest you return to your world and focus on survival, not ambition. That is all. Ambassador Giwan looked up at the hundreds of alien faces, all still smiling, still chuckling at the ridiculous humans from their impossible world. She took a slow breath. Then she nodded once. You understand, she said, her voice calm and even. Thank you for your time. She turned and walked toward the exit. Captain Minho followed, his footsteps heavy and measured. Dr. Hannah gathered her materials, her hands moving quickly, efficiently. None of them looked back. None of them argued. None of them pleaded. They simply left. The silence of their departure somehow made the Council laugh even harder. The humans had accepted their place without even trying to fight. As expected from primitives who didn't understand how the galaxy really worked, as the human shuttle detached from the station and began its journey back toward Earth. Giwan sat in her chair and stared out at the stars. Captain Minho stood at the viewport, his reflection showing eyes that burned with quiet fury. Dr. Hannah worked at her console, her fingers flying across the keys as she compiled every piece of data they had gathered. Every species that had laughed, every species that had spoken, every detail about the Council's structure, their technology, their assumptions. G1 opened a secure communication channel back to Earth. Her message was brief and coded, but its meaning was clear to those who needed to understand. We were not taken seriously. They think we are weak. They think we are jokes. Recommend Protocol Sigma. Message was sent. The channel closed. Giwan sat back in her chair and closed her eyes. The Council had made a mistake today. They had done something that humans throughout history had learned never to do. They had underestimated an enemy. They had laughed at someone who had offered peace, and in their laughter, they had given humanity something far more valuable than membership in their council. They had given them motivation. They had given them time. And most importantly, they had given them the element of surprise. The shuttle jumped to FTL, leaving the glowing station behind. Back on the station, the Council was already forgetting about the humans. Just another failed species that would likely destroy itself within a generation or two. As most Deathworld species did, they would remember this day eventually. But by then, it would be far too late. 6 months passed since the Council's rejection, and the galaxy heard nothing from humanity. No angry messages, no desperate appeals, no second petitions. The few human ships that had been exploring nearby systems simply vanished from Council sensors. Trade requests that had been tentatively sent out were withdrawn. Communication channels that humans had opened went dark and stayed dark. It was as if humanity had simply given up and gone home to their impossible death world. The Council's intelligence services found this behavior perfectly normal. Most rejected species either destroyed themselves in nuclear fire or retreated into isolation. Category 7 species especially tended to be unstable. The silence from Earth was exactly what the analysts had predicted. Few Council members expressed mild curiosity about the humans' sudden disappearance. Scholar Pixnell of the Archive Collective sent several survey drones toward Earth's system, hoping to study the species before they inevitably went extinct. The drones never reported back. This too was considered normal. Primitive species often destroyed things they didn't understand, even things trying to help them. What the Council didn't know was that those drones hadn't been destroyed. They had been captured, carefully taken apart, studied, and their technology reverse-engineered. Every piece of Council's surveillance equipment that entered human space met the same fate. Humanity was learning, and they were learning fast. On Earth, Ambassador Jiwan stood in a secure facility buried deep beneath the mountains. Around her, holographic displays showed star maps, ship designs, and intelligence reports. Director Kyung, the head of Earth's United Defense Coalition, stood beside her. He was an older man with gray hair and eyes that had seen too many wars. Before first contact, he had been preparing humanity for potential alien threats. After the Council's rejection, his warnings had been proven correct. Protocol Sigma is now active, Director Kyung said, his voice echoing in the command center. Every resource, every facility, every mind we have is focused on one goal. We will not be laughed at again. Across the solar system, humanity moved with purpose. Shipyards that had been building exploration vessels were retooled overnight. New designs emerged from engineering departments, designs that looked nothing like the peaceful ships humans had shown to the Council. These were lean, efficient, built for one purpose: war. Engineer Sunmi worked 20-hour days in the asteroid belt shipyards. She was young, barely 30, but she had a gift for seeing how things fit together. The Council's technology was advanced, but it followed patterns. Those patterns could be exploited. She designed ships that moved faster than Council vessels, used less fuel, and carried weapons that the Council had never bothered to develop because they considered them crude. They fight with energy weapons, Sunmi explained to her team during a design review. Plasma cannons, particle beams, things that look impressive and follow rules of engagement that are thousands of years old. We're going to hit them with things they've forgotten about. Kinetic weapons, nuclear-pumped lasers. Old Earth technology made new again. Her deputy raised a concern. Won't they just shield against kinetics? Sunmi smiled. Their shields are designed to stop high-energy particles. A chunk of metal moving at a significant fraction of light speed? That's not something their shields were built to handle. We're going to use their own sophistication against them.
On Mars?
In training facilities hidden beneath the red soil, Captain Minho drilled the first battalions of what would become humanity's military response to the galaxy. These weren't peacekeepers. These weren't explorers. These were soldiers trained in every form of combat that humans had developed over thousands of years of fighting each other. Their own deadly planet. Minho walked through the training halls, watching young men and women learn how to fight in zero gravity, how to breach airlocks, how to turn a spaceship's corridors into a killing ground. The Council species had evolved on gentle worlds. They fought with honor, with rules, with traditions. Humans had evolved in a place where honor was a luxury and survival was everything. The galaxy thinks we're weak, Minho told his officers during a strategy session. They think because our world is harsh, we must be barely surviving. They don't understand that harsh worlds don't make weak species. They make strong ones. Every human alive is descended from survivors. Our ancestors survived ice ages, plagues, predators, and each other. We are not weak. We are the opposite of weak. Dr. Hannah worked in the intelligence division, coordinating with Commander Hyun-woo to analyze everything humanity had learned about the Council. Every species that had laughed had been cataloged. Their biology, their technology, their military tactics, their culture. Hannah had spent her career studying alien life in theory. Now she studied it with a different purpose. The Draven consider themselves the greatest warriors in the galaxy, she reported during a briefing. But their combat doctrine hasn't changed in 2,000 years. They fight in formation, ship to ship, following protocols that are taught in their military academies. They're predictable. Commander Hyun-woo nodded, making notes. Predictable can be exploited. More than that, Hannah continued. They're arrogant. They beat their opponents through superior numbers and technology, not tactics. They've never faced an enemy that couldn't match their technology but could outthink them. Intelligence operatives. Carefully trained and enhanced with the best technology humanity could produce, began infiltrating Council space. They didn't go as diplomats or traitors. They went as invisible observers, hacking into networks, stealing data, learning everything the Council had never bothered to protect, because they assumed no one would dare steal from them. The Council's computer security was sophisticated but had a fatal flaw. It was designed to prevent Council species from spying on each other, not to stop an outside threat. Human hackers, descended from generations of people who had learned to break into systems for fun and profit, found the gaps and slipped through them like ghosts. Within months, humanity had complete maps of Council military positions, trade routes, resource locations, and political tensions. They learned which species were happy with the Council and which ones chafed under its rule. They learned where the power really lay and where the weaknesses were. Admiral Do-yeon, promoted from captain to lead humanity's rapidly growing fleet, studied these reports with intense focus. He was a strategic thinker, someone who could see several moves ahead. The Council had made a fundamental error in dismissing humanity. They had given them time to prepare and motivation to succeed. "We're not going to fight the entire Council," Do-yeon said during a meeting with Earth's leadership. "We're going to fight smart. We pick targets that matter. We demonstrate capability. We make them respect us through action, not words." Ambassador Juwon agreed. The Council's greatest weakness is their assumption of superiority. They've ruled for 100,000 years without serious challenge. They've become comfortable, predictable, bureaucratic. They think the galaxy works a certain way because it always has. We're going to show them that the old rules don't apply anymore. New facilities were built in secret locations throughout human space. Research stations developed weapons and tactics that the Council would never expect. Biologists worked on understanding alien physiology, looking for weaknesses. Physicists pushed the boundaries of FTL technology, making human ships faster and more efficient. Strategists war-gamed countless scenarios, preparing for every possible response. The silence from Earth continued. Council intelligence occasionally noted the lack of human activity and filed reports saying the species had likely gone extinct or retreated into permanent isolation. No one investigated further. Why would they? Humanity was irrelevant. In the shipyards, Engineer Sunmi watched as the first vessel of humanity's new fleet was completed. It was called the Defiant, and it was beautiful in a brutal, efficient way. Every line served a purpose. Every system was redundant. It looked nothing like Council ships with their elegant curves and decorative elements. This was a ship built by people who knew that space was trying to kill them and that looking pretty was less important than staying alive. Captain Minho, now promoted to Admiral, took command of the Defiant. He walked through its corridors, checked its systems, and felt satisfied. This was a ship that matched humanity's spirit. Tough, efficient, and underestimated. "How long until the fleet is ready?" he asked Engineer Sunmi during the final inspection. The first battle group will be fully operational in 3 months, she replied. We'll have 5 more battle groups completed within the year. Minho nodded. Good, we're going to need them. Meanwhile, Director Kyung met with Ambassador Giwon in the command center. Around them, displays showed human preparations across the solar system and beyond. Hidden bases, secret shipyards, intelligence networks spreading through council space like invisible webs. The council thinks we've given up, Kyung said. They think we're hiding on our death world, too scared to face the galaxy. Juan smiled, a cold expression that held no humor. Let them think that. When we're ready, we'll show them exactly what a death world species can do. The plans were made. The mining colony on Dravis 4 had been operating for 300 years without incident. It was a Draven world, rich in rare minerals needed for FTL drives throughout the galaxy. Governor Wickstar ran the colony with efficient brutality, pushing workers hard and shipping resources back to the Draven homeworld on schedule. The system was protected by a full battle group, 3 massive capital ships, and 24 support vessels. More than enough firepower to handle pirates or any other threat. Governor Wickstar was reviewing production reports when his communication system activated. The message that came through was in perfect Draven language, which surprised him. It was a human voice, speaking clearly. This system has been claimed by humanity. You have 24 hours to evacuate all personnel. Any ships or structures remaining after that time will be considered hostile and dealt with accordingly. Wickstar stared at the message for a long moment. Then he started laughing. The humans. The joke species from the death world. He had heard the story about their failed petition to the council. Everyone had heard it. It was a funny story shared at social gatherings. He didn't bother responding to the message. Instead, he immediately contacted General Thox, the Draven military commander who had laughed the loudest at the humans during their council appearance. Thox was currently stationed 3 systems away with his personal fleet. General, you'll enjoy this, Wickstar said, forwarding the human message. The primitives are getting bold. Perhaps you'd like to teach them a lesson. General Thox watched the message and felt a surge of anticipation. This was perfect. The Draven had been at peace for too long. His warriors needed real combat experience, and crushing a few human ships would provide good training while also amusing the entire galaxy. He could already imagine the stories that would be told. I'll handle this personally, Thox replied. Have your people evacuate the essential personnel if you want, but keep the mining operations running. This won't take long. Within hours, General Thox assembled a massive fleet. 50 warships, including his personal flagship, the Conqueror. It was the most powerful vessel in the Draven fleet, bristling with weapons and protected by shields that could withstand sustained bombardment. He brought overwhelming force because he wanted this to be a demonstration. When you crushed an enemy, you did it so thoroughly that no one would dare challenge you again. The Draven fleet arrived at Dravis 4 with all the ceremony of a victorious parade. Thox broadcast on all frequencies in his deep, grinding voice. Humans of Earth, this is General Thox of the Draven Empire. You have made a foolish mistake. Surrender immediately, and we will consider allowing you to return to your world. Resist, and we will destroy every ship you have and make an example that the galaxy will remember. He waited for a response. Begging, perhaps? Or desperate attempts at negotiation? Or panicked retreat? Instead, silence. Thox frowned. Scan the system. Find the human ships. His sensor officers worked their consoles. General, we're detecting multiple small crafts scattered throughout the system. Nothing larger than Corvette class. Maybe 30 vessels total? Thox laughed. 30 small ships against our fleet. Are they insane? Then, without any warning or declaration, the battle began. The human ships didn't form up for a traditional engagement. They didn't broadcast challenges or establish battle lines. They simply attacked, and they attacked in ways the Draven had never seen. Small human vessels accelerated at speeds that should have killed their crews. Burning toward the Draven fleet, Thox ordered his ships to open fire. Plasma cannons lit up space, energy weapons designed to vaporize incoming threats. But the human ships were moving erratically, using random course corrections that made them nearly impossible to target accurately. And they were fast. So fast that even direct hits often missed, as the ships jinked away at the last possible second. "They're not following any standard attack pattern," his tactical officer reported. Confusion clear in his voice. "Then adapt," Thox growled. "We have 50 ships. They have 30. This is simple mathematics." But it wasn't simple. The human ships closed the distance, and then they did something unexpected. They attached themselves to the hulls of the Draven capital ships like parasites. Magnetic clamps locked on, and the human vessels became almost impossible to hit without the Draven shooting their own ships. Thox demanded. He got his answer seconds later. Breaching charges exploded on the hulls of his ships. The human vessels had brought boarding parties. Inside the Draven ships, alarms blared. Marines rushed to repel the boarders, confident in their superiority. The Draven were warriors, after all. They were bigger and stronger than most species. They had trained for combat their entire lives. Then they met the humans. Captain Krunji led her strike team through the breached hull of a Draven battleship. She was small compared to the Draven, but she moved through the corridors with deadly precision. Her team spread out, using the confined spaces to their advantage. The Draven liked big open areas where they could use their size and strength. Humans turned every corner, every doorway, every junction into a trap. Lieutenant Jiho's reconnaissance had provided detailed schematics of Draven ships. Humanity had spent months learning everything about their enemy. Now that knowledge paid off. The humans knew where life support was, where power systems were located, where the crew would be concentrated. The Draven Marines were brave and strong, but they were unprepared for human tactics. The humans used the ship's own environment against them, venting atmosphere in strategic locations, cutting power to sections, using electromagnetic pulses that disabled Draven weapons but didn't affect the humans in their shielded suits. And the humans fought with a ferocity that shocked the Draven. These weren't warriors following rules of engagement. These were survivors from a death world, where the only rule was staying alive. They fought dirty, using every advantage. Exploiting every weakness, Captain Yunji's team reached the bridge of their target ship in less than 20 minutes. The Draven captain tried to fight, but Yunji put 3 rounds through his chest before he could fully draw his weapon. Her team secured the bridge and took control of the ship's systems. Target secured, she reported on the tactical network. Moving to secondary objectives, across the fleet similar scenes played out. Human boarding teams seized control of ship after ship. The Draven had numbers, but the humans had surprise speed, and tactics that the Draven couldn't counter. In space, Admiral Doyon commanded the human fleet from his position in the outer system. He watched the battle unfold on holographic displays, his expression calm. Everything was going according to plan. Deploy kinetic strikes on targets marked 7 through 12, he ordered. Human ships in the outer system launched projectiles. These weren't missiles or energy weapons. They were simple chunks of dense metal, accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed using humanity's improved FTL technology. The Council's shields were designed to stop energy weapons and slow-moving physical objects. But relativistic kinetics were something different. They carried so much energy that when they hit, the shields failed almost instantly. 3 Draven ships exploded in brilliant flashes as the kinetic strikes punched through their defenses and detonated their reactors. 3 more were crippled, venting atmosphere and dead in space. General Thox watched his fleet fall apart with growing horror. This wasn't how battles were supposed to go. Where were the formal challenges? Where were the organized battle lines? The humans were fighting like animals, like pirates, like nothing he had ever encountered. All ships, concentrate fire on the human vessels, he ordered. Ignore standard protocols. Kill them all. But the human ships refused to stay still long enough to be killed. They used hit-and-run tactics, appearing from unexpected angles, firing and vanishing again. And when Draven ships moved to pursue, they found themselves isolated from the fleet and vulnerable to ambush. The Conqueror, Thox's flagship, shuddered as something attached to its hull. Then another shudder, and another. Multiple human boarding teams were breaching his ship. His Marines responded, rushing to defend, but reports coming back were all the same. The humans were cutting through his crew like they were nothing, Admiral. Doyon watched one of his tactical officers report casualty figures. Sir, we've lost 2 corvettes and taken damage to 4 others. Enemy casualties are at 67% and rising. Doyon nodded. Acceptable losses. The plan was working perfectly. Signal the reserves. Have them jump in and secure the perimeter. I don't want any Draven ships escaping to report what they've seen here. More human ships appeared from FTL, fresh and undamaged. They formed a perimeter around the system, cutting off any escape routes. General Thox realized, perhaps for the first time in his life, that he was going to lose. His fleet, his pride, his reputation, all of it, was being destroyed by a species he had dismissed as a joke. The irony was almost too much to bear. His flagship's bridge shook as explosions walked across the hull. His shields were failing. His weapons were offline. And somewhere in his ship, human soldiers were fighting their way toward him. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was the most crowded meeting in 3,000 years. Every species sent their highest-ranking representatives. The chamber that had once echoed with laughter at humanity's expense now buzzed with anxious conversation and fearful speculation. Council. Prime Velthera called the session to order. Its crystalline form dimmer than usual, as if the stress of the situation had physically affected it. We are gathered to discuss the incident at Dravis 4 and the unprecedented actions of the human species. Scholar Pixnell stepped forward to present the analysis. The elderly academic looked tired, as if it hadn't slept since receiving the news. It activated a holographic display showing the battle in detail, reconstructed from sensor data and survivor reports. The humans employed tactics we have never encountered, Pixnell began, its voice shaking slightly. They did not engage in traditional ship-to-ship combat. They used boarding actions, kinetic weapons, and asymmetric warfare strategies. Most significantly, they demonstrated detailed knowledge of Draven ship design, tactical doctrine, and military procedures. The display showed human ships moving with impossible precision, exploiting weaknesses that shouldn't have been known to an outside species. It showed boarding parties navigating Draven vessels as if they had the blueprints memorized. It showed attacks timed perfectly to catch the Draven fleet at its most vulnerable. This was not luck, Pixnell continued. This was preparation. The humans spent the last 18 months studying us. While we dismissed them as irrelevant, they were learning everything about us. Our technology, our tactics, our weaknesses. They turned our own sophistication against us. A council member from a species that resembled large insects spoke up. How did they access classified Draven military information? Our networks are secure. Commander Hyunwoo could have answered that question, but he was hundreds of light years away in human space. Reviewing the latest intelligence gathered from council networks, his operatives had been inside council systems for over a year and no one had noticed. The council's security was designed to prevent member species from spying on each other, but it had never considered an external threat. That oversight had cost them dearly. General Thox, who had survived the battle but lost his command in disgrace, stood to speak. He looked smaller somehow, diminished by defeat. They fought without honor, without rules, like savages. They fought to win, Pixnell corrected gently. That is the key difference. We fight according to traditions that are thousands of years old. We follow protocols, establish rules of engagement, and conduct warfare as a formal process. The humans fight as if their lives depend on it. Because on their world, everything is a matter of survival. Another voice joined the discussion. Counselor Brethel of the Archive Collective, a species known for diplomatic wisdom. We made a critical error in our assessment of humanity. We assumed that because they came from a harsh world, they would be primitive and weak. We failed to consider that harsh environments produce strong, adaptable, and resourceful species. Every challenge that makes their world uninhabitable by our standards forced them to become better at survival. The displays shifted to show Earth in detail. The crushing gravity, the corrosive atmosphere, the violent weather, the dangerous wildlife. every element that had made the council classify it as uninhabitable. They evolved in constant competition, Brethel continued, not just with their environment, but with each other. Humans have been fighting wars for their entire history. They have been developing weapons and tactics for thousands of years. While we maintained peace through tradition and law, they were forging themselves in fire. We laughed at warriors who had been training for war their entire existence. The chamber fell silent. The implications were staggering. Valthera spoke, its voice carrying a weight of authority. The question now is how we respond. Some advocate for a full military mobilization. Crush humanity before they become a greater threat.
Ow.
Several species voiced agreement. They violated council space. They attacked a member species. This cannot stand. But Councillor Brethel raised an objection. We have laws. We have procedures. We cannot simply exterminate a species because they frightened us. If we do that, what separates us from the monsters we claim to protect the galaxy from? They are the monsters, someone shouted from the upper tiers. Deathworld savages who fight without honor. They are survivors, Brethel countered. And we rejected them. We mocked them. We offered to put them in a zoo. What did we expect would happen? The debate raged for hours. Some wanted war. Others wanted diplomacy. A few wise voices suggested that fighting humanity might cost more than anyone was willing to pay. The Draven fleet had been crushed in 6 hours. How many more fleets would need to be sacrificed before humanity was defeated? And would they even be defeated? While the council argued, humanity acted. Ambassador Salman, who had been trained by Giwan personally, traveled to the home systems of smaller council species. These were civilizations that had been part of the council for thousands of years, but had never truly been heard. Their votes counted for little. Their concerns were often ignored. The major powers like the Draven and others made the real decisions. Salman met with their leaders privately, away from council oversight. She didn't threaten. She didn't demand. She asked questions. Are you satisfied with your position in the council? Do you feel your voice matters? What would you change if you could? The answers were revealing. Many smaller species harbored resentments that had been building for centuries. They felt used, exploited, ignored. The council claimed to represent everyone, but in practice, it served the interests of the powerful. Salman listened carefully, took notes, and made offers. Humanity doesn't want to conquer the galaxy. We want to be treated as equals. But we also believe that everyone deserves respect and a real voice. If you were to support our petition for council membership, we would support your interests in return. We offer technology transfers, defense packs, and most importantly, genuine partnership. It was appealing. Some species were cautious, worried about angering the council's major powers. But others were tired of being stepped on. They began to listen more seriously. Meanwhile, human fleets continued to appear throughout council space. Not invading, but occupying unclaimed systems, establishing outposts, demonstrating presence. Each time the council moved to challenge them, they found the humans already entrenched. Removing them would require military action, and after what happened to the Draven, no one was eager to be the next example. Admiral Doyon, now recognized as one of humanity's finest military commanders, coordinated these operations with precision. The strategy was simple: be everywhere, challenge everything, force the council to react on human terms. We're not trying to win a war, he explained to his fleet commanders. We're trying to win a political struggle. Every system we claim, every species we befriend, every challenge we make to council authority, it all adds up. We're eroding their power through 1,000 small cuts. Captain Minho, now an admiral himself, led strike forces that responded to any council attempt to push back against human expansion. But interestingly, those attempts were becoming rarer. The council was paralyzed by debate, unable to agree on a unified response. Within 6 months of the Dravis 4 incident, 12 minor species had signed formal agreements with humanity. They provided resources, intelligence, and political support. In exchange, humans offered protection, technology, and respect. Trade routes began to shift. Instead of flowing only to the major council powers, They now included human-controlled systems. Merchants who had never had options before suddenly found themselves with alternatives. Competition drove prices down and quality up. The economic impact rippled through council space. Engineer Sunmi's shipyards expanded, now building vessels not just for humanity but for their allies, small species that had never been able to afford modern military equipment suddenly found themselves with access to human technology. It wasn't as sophisticated as the best council equipment, but it was effective, cheap, and came without strings attached. Dr. Hannah worked with alien scientists, sharing knowledge and learning in return. She discovered that many species had brilliant researchers whose work had been dismissed by the Council's academic establishment. Humans didn't care about traditional hierarchies. If someone had a good idea, humanity would listen. The Council watched all of this with growing alarm. Their authority, unchallenged for 100,000 years, was being questioned. Species that had always done what they were told were suddenly making independent decisions. The established order was fracturing. They're turning our own members against us. One council member complained during a closed session. Counselor Brethel corrected. They're offering our members something we never did. Choice. Our emergency sessions were called. More debates raged. But the council was designed for managing an established order. It's not for responding to a crisis that required quick decisions and unified action. Every proposal required consensus. Every action required approval from hundreds of species with different interests. Humanity, organized under a single unified command, could move and adapt in days. The council needed months just to schedule meetings. 3 years after the council's rejection, Ambassador Juan walked through the same corridors she had walked before. But everything was different now. The floating jellyfish guide that had escorted her the first time was gone, replaced by a full honor guard. Alien species that had once ignored her now stepped aside, respectfully. Some even nodded in greeting. Captain Minho and Dr. Hannah walked beside her again, but their roles had changed. Minho was now Admiral Minho, commander of humanity's Third Fleet, which was currently stationed just outside the system as a very visible reminder of human military capability. Hannah was Director Hannah, head of humanity's Alien Relations Department, responsible for managing relationships with dozens of species. The council chamber was packed. Every species had sent representatives, but the atmosphere was nothing like before. There was no laughter this time, no mockery. The chamber hummed with tension and anticipation. Giwan took her place on the central platform. She looked up at the rows of alien faces, seeing fear in some, respect in others, and calculation in many. Council Prime Velthera looked down at her, its crystalline form pulsing with a light that seemed almost nervous. Ambassador Giwan Velthera began, its voice carefully neutral. The Council has invited you to address this assembly regarding humanity's petition for membership. Guan let the silence stretch for a moment. She had learned that silence could be a weapon just as powerful as words. Thank you, Council Prime, she finally said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. I appreciate the invitation. However, I must correct something. We are not here to petition. We are here to discuss terms, a murmur rippled through the assembly. Velthera's light flickered. Terms. Yes, Guan continued calmly. 3 years ago, we came before this council, asking to be accepted as equals. You laughed at us. You offered to put us in a zoo. You dismissed us as primitives from an impossible world. We left that day without a word because words had failed. So we chose to speak in a language you would understand. She gestured, and holographic displays activated around her. Images of Draven's 4, the destroyed Draven fleet. Human outposts across council space, star maps showing the dozens of systems now under human control. The faces of the 12 species that had signed alliances with humanity. We have proven ourselves by your own standards, Guan said. We control territory. We have allies. We have demonstrated military and economic capability. We have shown that we can compete with any species in this chamber. The question is not whether humanity deserves a place in this council. The question is whether the council deserves to have humanity as a member. The chamber erupted in angry voices. Some species shouted in outrage at the audacity. Others called for order. A few, Juan noticed, remained silent and thoughtful. General Thox, still a member of the council, despite his military disgrace, stood up. His voice was tight with barely controlled rage. "You attack us, steal our territory, and then demand we reward you for it. This is barbarism." Guan turned to face him directly. "We claimed an uninhabited system and gave you 24 hours to evacuate peacefully. You responded with overwhelming military force, confident that you would crush us easily. We defended ourselves. That is not barbarism. That is survival. Perhaps if you had taken us seriously from the beginning, none of this would have been necessary." Dr. Hannah stepped forward, activating another display. "If I may, I'd like to address the Council's fundamental misunderstanding about humanity. You classified Earth as a Category 7 death world and assumed that made us weak. But consider what that classification really means." The display showed Earth in detail. The gravity that would crush most Council species, the oxygen-rich atmosphere that would be toxic to many, the extreme weather patterns, the dangerous wildlife, all the things that made it uninhabitable. Every one of these challenges made us stronger, Hannah explained. High gravity gave us dense bones and powerful muscles. Toxic atmosphere to you is necessary to us. We literally breathe one of the most reactive elements in the universe. Our weather taught us to prepare and adapt. Our wildlife taught us to be alert and resourceful. We didn't evolve in spite of our world's hostility. We evolved because of it. Counselor Brethel, who had been one of the few voices of reason during the Council's debates, spoke up. "The ambassador makes valid points. We judged humanity by our own standards rather than understanding them on their own terms. This was our error, not theirs. They violated our laws," someone shouted from the upper tiers. "What laws?" Ji-Wan asked, her voice sharp. "We were not members of the Council. Your laws did not apply to us. We claimed unclaimed territory. When challenged, we defended ourselves. Everything we did was within the rights of a sovereign species. Belthera raised an appendage for silence. Let us move past recriminations. Ambassador Guiwan, you said you wished to discuss terms. What are humanity's requirements for Council membership?" Guiwan had prepared for this moment. She had spent 3 years working toward it. Every action, every battle, every alliance had been calculated to lead to this conversation. First, full voting rights equal to any other Council member. Not probationary status, not observer status. Full membership with all rights and responsibilities. Several species nodded. This was reasonable. Second, recognition of human territorial claims. All systems currently under human control remain under human control. This was more controversial, but after 3 years, trying to take those systems back would be costly. The Council knew it. Third, formal diplomatic recognition of the alliances humanity has formed. The species who chose to work with us did so freely and will not face punishment or pressure to break those agreements. Now there was real discomfort in the chamber. Those alliances represented a shift in power that many major species found threatening. But Counselor Brethel spoke up again. The smaller Council members have always been free to form alliances. We cannot punish them for choosing partners we happen to dislike. That would make a mockery of everything the Council claims to stand for. Fourth, Guiwan continued, a seat on the Council Security Committee. Humanity will participate in decisions regarding galactic security in military matters. This caused outrage. "Absolutely not," General Thox shouted. "You've been a spacefaring species for less than a decade. You cannot be trusted with such responsibility." Admiral Minho, who had remained silent until now, spoke for the first time. His voice was quiet but carried weight. "We destroyed your finest fleet in 6 hours. We have outmaneuvered you politically and economically for 3 years. We have demonstrated capability that your most advanced species struggle to match. If we cannot be trusted with responsibility, perhaps the question is whether you can be trusted to recognize competence when you see it." The silence that followed was profound. Director Kuhn, watching from Earth, smiled. Minho had been his student once, and the lesson had been learned well. Respect is not given. It is earned and then taken. Giwan waited for the shock to fade before continuing. And fifth, humanity requests formal apologies be issued to the species who were dismissed, ignored, or mistreated by the Council. Not for our benefit, but for theirs. They deserve recognition that their concerns matter. This last demand surprised everyone. It wasn't about human pride or power. It was about the smaller species that humanity had befriended. It was a message that humanity remembered its allies. Valthara was quiet for a long time, slight pulsing in patterns that might have been thought. Finally it spoke. These are substantial demands. The Council will need time to deliberate. Of course, Jiwan agreed. But understand that time works in our favor, not yours. Every day that passes, humanity grows stronger. Every day, more species question whether the Council truly represents their interests. Every day, the old order becomes harder to maintain. We are offering you a chance to adapt peacefully. I suggest you take it. She turned and walked toward the exit, Minho and Hannah following. This time, she didn't wait to be dismissed. She left on her own terms. The Council deliberated for 3 weeks. The debates were intense. Some species wanted to fight, to try once more to crush humanity and restore the old order. But the pragmatists won out. Fighting humanity would be costly, and victory was far from certain. More importantly, fighting humanity would likely shatter the Council entirely, as species chose sides. Better to adapt than to break. The vote was close, but it passed. Humanity was granted full Council membership, with all requested terms accepted. The formal ceremony took place a month later. Ambassador Giwan stood before the Council once more. This time not to beg but to be welcomed. As she took the oath of membership, administered by Valthara, she allowed herself to feel the weight of what had been accomplished. 3 years ago, the galaxy had laughed at humanity. Now, humanity stood as an equal power, respected and feared in equal measure. After the ceremony, Counselor Brethel approached Jiwan privately. The elderly alien looked at her with something that might have been admiration. Played this perfectly, Brethel said quietly. Every move calculated, every action timed precisely. Tell me, was this always the plan? Even when you first came before us?